Thank you very much, Kareem. And thank you and the Foundation board members for having me here and extending the opportunity to speak with the men on this day during this particular month. This is a topic that is very near and dear because, number one, I'm an African American male in America, and these disease processes and health all affect me as much as everyone else. And men, as Kareem alluded to, we don't take the opportunity to go to the doctor as often as we should and to follow up as well. So I'd like to go ahead today and take a little time to just show why it is important to go to the physician, to come to see your family medical doctor like myself, who we try to look at prevention. We want everybody to be healthy. We want to see you once a year, tell you everything is well, but going through all the various disease processes that might be appropriate for the age range that the person is presenting in, and then say, see you next year. But when we do find a specific illness, we want to stay on top of that. We no longer can prevent it at that point. We definitely can manage it and control it. Unfortunately, there are not too many cures in medicine at these days, but we can manage symptoms and disease processes very well. So let's go ahead and start finding out a little bit more what we need to do. So African American men, we have an increased risk of all adverse health events. We get things to a worse degree in an earlier point in life than our Caucasian male counterparts and some of the other cultures as well. So it is important to find out why. This increased risk is based on what we call non-modifiable risk factors. These are things that you cannot diet, exercise, or pray away. We are born into them. We have to take it as it is, and then do what we can to delay or prevent the actual illness from overtaking us. So what are these non-modifiable risk factors? Male sex. Simply being born a male in America puts you at risk. Race, African American. So basically, everybody who's listening and attending today was born with two risk factors. Then age. The current age of risk is 45. So that's why I like to talk with my young men between the ages of 20 and 40. They feel they're invincible. They stay up late, get up early, and go hard throughout the course of their day. They turn 40 and for some reason stumble into the doctor's office and say, hey, doc, I turned 40 and I'm falling apart. Well, no, it's actually what you did for the last 20 years that is now catching up with you. So the age of risk, 45. And then family history. Now, unfortunately, many people do not know their family history because our family unit does no longer interact as we once did. So I challenge all the men, find the oldest living female relative, grandmother, aunt, mother, because that's the person who has always been the nurturer, who knows the family history, who knows what your grandfather passed from, what your uncles may have passed from. And those are the things that you are now at risk for. And we're going ahead and talk about those diseases in a moment. But now these are the four things that are non-modifiable, cannot change. So you're male, African-American ancestry, know what your age group range is, find out what your family history is from your family historian, and then you'll know just some of the things that you are at increased risk of. So these disease processes, let's talk about heart disease first. Unfortunately, we all know somebody personally or in the public eye that has passed away suddenly, unexpectedly from heart disease. Heart disease is the number one cause of death worldwide, and even more so in the African American community. And coronary artery disease is highlighted by hypertension. Hypertension, the silent killer. Patients come in, once again, that magic number of 40, come into the office, check blood pressure on everybody at every visit. You tell them, oh, your blood pressure is high. Oh, I've never had that before. Well, have you ever had it checked before, number one? And then number two, we haven't had anything until we do. So that's why it's so very important to go in at least once a year for a blood pressure check, and getting a blood pressure checked more often if you can with your own device or attending health fairs in your local community. Takes seconds to get your blood pressure checked. You can get it checked at your local fire station with the paramedics there. They will check your blood pressure at your pharmacy. And the numbers that you're currently looking for is for that top number to be less than 130 and for the bottom to be less than 80. Many of you may have grown up and heard all the years 140 over 90. That was true until the New York Heart Association changed these numbers in 2017. It is now even lower. So less than 130 for the top, less than 80 for the bottom. That's what you're looking for. Lower is better. Hypertension, I called it the silent killer. That's something else. Patients will say, I don't feel anything. Unfortunately, with hypertension, you won't. You won't feel anything until you do. And by you do, I mean a stroke or a heart attack. Unfortunately, I'd like to relate today, a friend of mine, I was talking with him on June the 5th about attending a state medical golf outing. He's an avid golfer, might be something right up his alley. He had to work and couldn't attend that day. A week later, he was found dead in his home. His funeral was 2 hours ago. This is a 60-year-old African-American male, a physician. So these disease processes do not discriminate. All men of color have these risks and need to take these precautions to take care of themselves. Another disease that can lead to heart disease is diabetes mellitus, type 2 diabetes. Now, we might not always link diabetes with heart disease, but because diabetes affects the blood vessels, then the blood vessels, of course, go through the heart and deal with blood flow. So checking your blood sugar, also very important. Knowing your family history. You know, what did great grandmama have? You might hear the words like a touch of sugar, sugar diabetes. Those are all the words to listen out for, and then go ahead and translate that into 21st century speak of type 2 diabetes mellitus. That is when your blood sugar is over 130 before you've had anything to eat during the course of a day. Or the best number to know is what you might hear about in media, A1C, hemoglobin A1C. You want that number to be less than 5.6. 5.7 to 6.4 is called pre-diabetes. So not diabetic just yet. And I hesitate to use that term because people always want to say, I have a touch of, I have borderline. I'm more of an all or none type of physician. You either have diabetes or you don't. You have high blood pressure or you don't. Because when you give somebody that gray space, they'll err towards the side of not having it and not pay the close attention to it that it deserves. But pre-diabetes, this means you're at increased risk. You still need to change things in your lifestyle, your habit. You need to monitor your blood sugar. You need to go in for your follow-ups to make certain that that blood sugar is not going any higher and that the changes you have made have caused that A1C level to come back down. Dyslipidemia, also known as high cholesterol. And this is an abnormality in the cholesterol, the lipid numbers in our bodies. This is important because these are the part of the blood that can clog the arteries of the heart, of the brain, which can cause a heart attack or a stroke. You want that bad cholesterol, LDL. Start to pay attention to that number. It's no longer enough to know what your total cholesterol is, like the commercials have always said. My cholesterol is less than 200. That's what you want it to be. But you can have a total cholesterol of under 200 and a bad LDL cholesterol level of over 100 at the same time. So definitely go to your doctor, get a full lipid panel, and know what the LDL is and triglycerides. You want your triglyceride level to be less than 150. Now, when you have high blood pressure and or diabetes, because they oftentimes accompany dyslipidemia, then you want those numbers to be even lower. If you have hypertension or diabetes and your cholesterol, you want that LDL to be less than 70. You want the triglycerides to be less than 90 at that point, because each different disease process further increases your risk of heart disease. And lastly, if you have had a stroke or a heart attack, you want your LDL to be less than 55, even lower. Lower is better. Another part of the risk factors known as metabolic syndrome is obesity. America is the land of plenty. Most of us overeat and are overweight, obese, or morbidly obese. So more obesity, very common. And if you have a body mass index over 30, that is considered obese. Now, you have to measure your body mass index, usually with a weight in kilograms and your height in meters squared, numbers that most of us probably cannot calculate in our head. They make apps on your phone that you can get, put in what your weight is in pounds, what your height is in inches, and you will then see what your body mass index is. And again, you want it to be less than 25. You definitely want it to be less than 30, so you're no longer obese, increasing your risk of heart disease. Heart disease, besides strokes and heart attack, can be a chronic condition where you've heard of people having to get bypass surgery or stents placed in their heart. Now, these are serious procedures and can be life-saving, but we don't want to get to that point. So go to your doctor, get screened, talk to your family, find out the family history to the best of your abilities, and then the preventable things in your life that we will talk about in a future slide, that's what you want to focus on. Other disease processes that men of color are more prone to: cancers. There's an increased risk of cancer of various types. We'll focus on just a couple here. Prostate cancer is a very high rate of prostate cancer in the United States, and African American men are at worse risk of developing it. 1 in 4, 1 in 6 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer. The good thing about prostate cancer, it is a very slow growing tumor. So a man does not have to die from prostate cancer. Now, you can also get it diagnosed very easily by going to the doctor. Many men for years have been afraid to go to the doctor and get their prostate checked because of how they heard that this test has to be done. But now you can go and get a blood screening, which will prompt the physician to know what degree of illness you may have in your prostate before having to be more invasive with any sorts of screenings and or testings. So do not be afraid of the blood test, looking for what's called your PSA, prostatic specific antigen. This is a blood number that looks specifically at the prostate itself. It should be less than 4, ideally under 2.5, according to the American Urological Association, the physicians who specialize in prostate health. So getting that test done once a year will guide the doctor as to what more needs to be done for you and help you with your risk. You usually start testing for prostate disease in men of color at 40, which is 10 years earlier than men of other ethnicities. So 40, you need to get your prostate screened. Now, if you go and get that family history we spoke about, you find out that your father, your uncle, your brothers, your grandfather had prostate disease, you want to go and get tested sooner. You don't necessarily want to wait until you're 40 if you're 30. I have 2 friends right now who have been diagnosed and are being evaluated and treated. So this is a very real disease. It is something that we can detect, something that can be treated. You can take the prostate out. They can be treated with radiation seeds, and all of that will help to shrink any tumors or cancers and decrease your risk of further disease process, or we call it morbidity and mortality, where you pass away from this particular disease. Colorectal cancer, colon cancer. This is what took away Chadwick Boseman. Many of you know him as the Black Panther actor. He died at the age of 43 from colon cancer. Now, this is a disease that also is detectable. You used to check people at age 50, not just men, but everybody, men and women alike, all ethnicities and cultures, 50, the screening. However, over time, it has come to be found that people of color, once again, were being diagnosed at an earlier age. It has touched my life. One of my residency classmates was diagnosed right when he was 50 years old, and by 55, he had succumbed to the disease. One of my classmates from college passed away at 48. And also one of my medical school classmates, also 48. These are 2 women who contracted colon cancer and passed away. So now the age of testing has been brought down to 45 for people of color. So you need to go in and get what's called a colonoscopy. Now, something else that has deterred people from getting this screening is the preparation. It is not as harsh as it was even 5 years ago. The preparation consists merely of Gatorade, which I'm sure everybody has had at some point in their lives if you do any kind of physical sporting activity, and Miralax, which is a very commonly used fiber laxative sold at every grocery store and pharmacy for constipation. So that's the combination that is now used by the gastrointestinal specialists, the doctors who do the colonoscopy, and you also get put to sleep. When I was training, you weren't put to sleep. You were still conscious when you had this testing done. But now you are completely put to sleep. You get tested and screened. The doctor can determine if you have any abnormalities and determine what further needs to be done. But the sooner you go and get screened, the better your chances for a better outcome. And also, if there is family history, you don't wait until you're 45. You go to your doctor, tell them that family history, and they will help you decide when to begin your specific screening. Now, I put lung cancer on here as well, not necessarily because African-American males are increased risk of the disease process, but what causes lung cancers. And the most common thing that we all know of is tobacco use, cigarette smoking. There is really no reason that anybody should smoke a cigarette. When I'm talking with my patients and trying to change their lifestyles around, I tell them there's nothing that you can't do except smoke. Now, if you choose to do other things with your diet, that is totally fine and up to you, but there is no reason that anybody who smokes a cigarette should continue, because that increases the risk of lung cancer, which can be deadly and not a pretty death either. As you heard in the introduction and part of my bio, Vitas Healthcare, who I also work with, that is a hospice company, meaning end-of-life care. So I deal with people who are dying on a daily basis from these disease processes that we're discussing here: heart disease, prostate cancer, colon cancer, lung cancer. We definitely don't want to shorten our lifespans from things that we can prevent, detect, and or treat. So what can we do? Laying out all these doomsday sorts of conversations and these disease processes, it is not all bad. There are things that can be done. It begins with diet. I'm sure you've all heard, you are what you eat. Eating healthier is the key. So eating healthy, more vegetables and fruit in your diet, raw vegetables, raw fruit. Cut back on eating fried foods, grilled foods, baked proteins. Air frying are better ways to prepare your meals as opposed to the good old-fashioned in the iron skillet frying. You want to get that grease away from your system. You want to cut back on, again, I'm not saying you can't have, cut back on foods that contain cholesterol. Things like butter, ice cream, ranch and blue cheese dressings, sour cream, mayonnaise, that food group. You can do food exchanges and eat the lighter versions of those foods if you just have to have them in your diet. More natural seasonings, whole onions and garlic as opposed to salts. If you do use the seasonings, you want to use powders rather than salts. That added salt can help to increase your blood pressure, which leads to hypertension and back to heart disease. Don't eat late at night. You want to combat obesity. Don't eat and immediately lay down. Don't skip meals. Your body does not know that you're trying to lose weight when you're skipping meals. It believes that you are actually starving it, and then it goes into starvation mode, meaning that when you do finally eat a meal, it will store all that food that you eat as fat that could be more readily and easily mobilized in times of need for energy, as opposed to lean muscle mass. But if you get into the habit of eating your well-balanced diet, a breakfast meal, a lunch meal, a dinner meal, and healthy snacks in between breakfast and lunch and dinner, then your metabolism stays turned on, churning and burning these foodstuffs when you do partake of them, and storing as lean muscle mass and burning the unwanted fat. So eat the same amount of calories, but spread it out over the course of a day. And then cut yourself off from eating at nighttime. There are various diets. If you so desire to go on a diet, that is fine. Work with your physician and or nutritionist to find out the best one for you, and then stay with it. But the key is to eat healthy. Now, it's not just eating healthy that's going to improve your heart health, but exercising, cardiovascular fitness. Start taking a walk in your neighborhood. If you want to join a fitness facility, do so. Get on a treadmill and walk. Work your way up to a light jog. Use the elliptical, the stair climber, any of those things, because you want to elevate your heart rate for a cardiovascular exercise. Walking, running, swimming, aerobics, bicycling, Zumba, spin classes, CrossFit. Those are the activities that you want to take part in. But remember this one as well, especially if you have not been active up until this point. Start slow and stretch. Stretch before you do your exercise program. Stretch after you have completed it for that day. This keeps your muscles from tightening up, prevents you from getting muscle sprains and strains, and from having aches and pains, which will then delay you from going back to doing that physical activity again. So stretch on a daily basis. And even when you first get up in the morning, as we age, our bodies become inflamed and have more aches and pains. So every morning when you wake up and your feet hit the ground, do a light stretch to get your body ready for your day's activities. When you get ready for your exercise part of your day, then you do a more pronounced stretching routine, taking 10, 15 minutes to get your body loosened up and ready. So these are some of the things that we can do to take better care of ourselves. To switch gears a little bit, I do want to touch on mental health and men as well. A topic that has not always been talked about for multiple reasons. One, as the man, it was not thought that anything deterred or bothered the man. Also, the men themselves were not always readily desired to come and speak about what they consider to be a weakness. Well, now we realize that men have mental illness as well. Men can be depressed. Men can be anxious. These are real diagnoses that deserve the time, energy, and effort to be addressed so that they can be treated, so that the males in our culture can continue to thrive and be strong and live productive lives. You may have seen in the news report yesterday, Roy Jones Jr., a very famous boxer, his son took his own life this past weekend. Most likely, he was dealing with and suffering from some degree of mental illness. Many of our men are veterans of our military service. And most recently, we've had in the 90s, the Gulf War and the war on terrorism. And our veterans have come back having seen some distressing things and having post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, panic. These are real issues that need to be addressed and recognized and appreciated. So don't be afraid, if this is you, to reach out to a behavioral health hotline. There probably is one associated with your human resources department on your job. If not, you can check. There's many 800 numbers that you can call, and definitely go to your family medicine, internal medicine physician, and go ahead and just talk to him or her. Be upfront and say, look, this is something that's been on my mind. I'd like to bring it up to you, and can you help me with it? And you will be surprised at the listening ears that will hear you. That's where it starts. Men, we sometimes feel we don't get heard. We want to go ahead and show that sensitive side to showing what some people consider a sign of weakness. Do not take it as such. Only 25% of African-American males seek mental health treatment compared to 40% of our Caucasian counterparts. You can be depressed. You can have anxiety disorder. So please, go ahead and get to your doctor and get these things checked out. Now, today has been about just touching on some disease processes that are unfortunately very common in our community, to show you the importance of getting to a doctor, to get it looked into, because there are treatments that can be done for you to help you. So I'd like to call now to the call to action. Go to the doctor. We're here. We're waiting to see you. We want to help you. Many people don't have health care coverage. That is an unfortunate reality. Well, doctors will work with you. You can also find clinics. You can find a health fair. Here in the Atlanta metropolitan area, we put on several health fairs a year, which are always free and open to the public. You just have to come. We will screen your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your blood sugar, oftentimes even your prostate. And we can get this information. At least you've been touched by a medical mind at some point. It can guide you as to what you might need to do further. When you do finally get to your doctor, hear what he or she has to say, and then always do the follow-up. You need to see what these blood tests that we took